So I welcome everybody to the 10th event of the Undergrund Slam Academy. I am at the auditorium of the Central European University, still in Budapest, and hopefully we will continue Undergrund Slam Academy events here from the fall offline in the auditorium, followed the previous day with a slam poetry competition in a cafe, Három Holló Café in Budapest. But this online event is a special opportunity to bring together slammers from other European countries as well. And I'm very happy that it became a V4 slam event, because there is Anatol from Prague, Maciej from Poland, and Tomás, hi Maciej, and Tomás from Slovakia, and I myself will participate as a slammer from Hungary as well. And my name is Peter Molnar, and I will introduce soon the expert participants. Let me just first outline the event for the public. The public can follow us or Zoom discussion and performances in a YouTube channel of the Central European University. And thank you so much for being with us, audience members, and please feel free to write any comment or question in the chat section of the YouTube channel, and we will drop it to the Zoom chat for the experts and slammer participants. And the simple outline will follow the 3-act structure of the Undergrund Slam Academy night. First, I will ask the expert participants the initial question, which is today that can we create a federalist common safeguard for press freedom in the European Union? Can we do that? And if we can, of course, it's good to talk about how to do it, what should be the focus of a regulation which protects freedom of the press and through that freedom of speech in all member states. So this will be the initial question, and I will ask all the expert participants to respond in the first round in a time frame of a slam poetry performance, meaning 3 minutes. It can be 3:30 or 4, but please keep it around that time, because you will have many other rounds to speak. And after each expert spoke, there will be a second round for the experts to comment on each other. And so this will be the first part. And I mention here quickly that before we go there, I will ask Dimitry Kochenov, who's leading the Rule of Law Working Group of the Democracy Institute at CEU, which is a very important new institution at CEU, and plays a very important role to keep up the presence of the Central European University in Budapest. So I will ask, after summarizing the outline, I will ask Dimitry to open up the event with welcoming remarks on behalf of the Democracy Institute. But before I pass the word to Dimitry, I just quickly mention that, so in the second part, we will do slam poetry. So as I mentioned, there will be 4 slammers, and so we will perform 4 pieces of slam poetry, 3 minutes each, or maybe even shorter or a bit longer. It may be also 4 minutes. And this will be a short part. And this, in the third act of this kind of theater play, conversational theater play, that will be the longest part probably. First, the slammers will raise questions to the speakers and reflect on on the issues of freedom of the press in Europe from their perspective as performers, and of course as citizens of their country and our common European Union. And then there will be a discussion, and please, any of you, if questions, comments arrive from the audience in the chat, I don't necessarily will pick them up, but if you see them in the chat, then please feel free to react on them any time. And before passing the word for Dimitry for welcoming remarks, and he will, if when as much as his time will allow, he will also provide some comments afterwards. Let me mention at the beginning that it's a very one-sided discussion, in the sense that, as far as I know, all the participants, everyone is extremely conservative, in the sense that we are all very much committed to defend the very traditional value of freedom of the press. So we may have all sorts of political orientations, but I think that's very common among us. And I think it will be good to build on that also when we may have some disagreements. And with that, I ask Dimitry, and thank you so much, Dimitry. It's so kind of you that you joined to us to say some welcoming remarks on behalf of the Democracy Institute of the Central European University.
I don't know if any one of you would remember Brezhnev, who couldn't really speak well, and he was always put on stage. So it's like a Brezhnevian rule. I am here, dear ladies and gentlemen, to open this event. But beyond this Brezhnevian role, I'm actually here to wholeheartedly welcome you. And the Democracy Institute is here in Budapest as a sign of CEU's continuous presence in the city, with which it's associated in many people's hearts and in many people's minds. So we were founded on the understanding that CEU should not teach in Hungary, and that the Hungarian government is not interested in having us here. Yet we can provide an important forum for leading academic discussions, and also offer a floor for debate. And of course, our position is always very, very clear. So without taking much of your time, I would just make an obvious connection between free speech and the rule of law. And here, one of our leading scholars who stayed in Budapest together with select few others is András Straka, of course, who is about to publish a book with Cambridge entitled "Ruling by Cheating." Any illiberal democracy is ruling by cheating, because it doesn't free up the public space to the critique of what the government is doing and what the government plans to do. So as long as you are not allowed to criticize, there is no talk possible of democracy, of any kind of functioning public institutions and the functioning state. So we are here in a way to raise flags and to prevent this from deteriorating any further. So it's my absolute delight to open this event. And of course, dissent is patriotic is one of the symbols of CEU. So to see Peter and what he has created is an absolute delight. And I'm very proud to be here today. I will also see how I can take part. So I am opening the event, ladies and gentlemen. Please, now I disappear.
Thank you so much, Dimitry. It was so nice, and after listening to your heartfelt welcoming words, let me welcome you also in the communities of slam poetry performers, because you were speaking in a way which could be also a piece of slam poetry. And thank you for recognizing my T-shirt. It's not on me by accident. And thank you also for mentioning András Straka, who created the comparative law comparative constitutional law program at CEU, and who has been a wonderful scholar of constitutional law and freedom of speech, and a great judge of the European Court of Human Rights, and inspiration for many of us. So thank you for bringing him in with mentioning him. And so starting now, I thought that first I read the short written comments by Gábor Polyák, who was with us yesterday in the first part of this discussion, which was in Hungarian, and where the question was whether the press in Hungary is free enough to enable the upcoming parliamentary elections next year to be free. And Gábor yesterday had some sort of somewhat pessimistic comments about that as well. Eva was here yesterday as well, and I thank her especially for participating at both events and helped me to bridge the two events. So I think that I read now Gábor's statements. Gábor is the head of the Mérték Media Research Group, a very good media watchdog in Hungary. So Gábor's comments are this for the conversation today. And of course, the conversation continues yesterday's discussion now in a broader European framework. Yesterday, we focused on Hungary. And thank you so much for looking at the whole European picture together today. So Gábor wrote, "My own sad experience is that after 11 years, the EU does not understand the Hungarian situation and refuses to take it seriously. Mérték media monitors, 2 competition complaints, have been on the Commission's desk for 5 and 2 years respectively. One would curb the billions poured into state media without limit. The other would put an end to the unbelievable amount of state advertising that is politically divided. Both would be a major help to Hungarian media freedom. The Audiovisual Media Services Regulation on the independence of media authorities also demonstrates the EU's unwillingness to understand the Hungarian situation. The independence of the regulatory body is subject only to formal conditions which are otherwise excellently fulfilled by the Hungarian media law. But still, the Media Council only gives radio frequencies to the cronies and only prevents independent media from entering the market. We have also said on several occasions during the Audiovisual Media Services Directive of the review of the Audiovisual Media Services Directive of the European Union that the independence of the media authorities of a member state can only be judged on the basis of its actual activities and the content of its decisions. There should be a monitoring system that provides factual information on whether the same criteria are applied to all market players in the authorities' practice. The Fundamental Rights Agency would be well placed to do this. The idea has been raised at every hearing, conference, and consultation. So in the eyes of the EU, the Hungarian Media Council is now certainly independent when we know fully well that it is not. So while the EU generously funds the building of the Orbán regime, it does nothing tangible to protect media freedom and democracy in general. It writes reports, expresses concerns, follows closely. The EU is not part of the solution today, it is part of the problem. So this is a sort of
Why are you afraid to show your face?
Sorry? Sorry, who said something?
No, nothing.
Okay, anyway, then it was just some technical noise. So this is the statement, sort of a somewhat dark picture that that Gábor Poják summarized, and I think that if maybe you just spoke, but can I maybe ask you, Dimitry, whether you have any comments on this? Would you agree that, because what Gábor outlined in the summary I read, he that connects a lot with how rule of law works. So do you think that the picture Gábor painted is realistic, or you have some disagreements maybe, or whatever comments?
Gábor is a true expert, so of course it would be unreasonable of me not to trust him and not to subscribe to what he has just conveyed to us. But I would just bring the other side of the federalist coin. Probably it's sometimes a mistake to think that delegating powers to the supranational, international, etc. level will necessarily help us in all cases. So if the Fundamental Rights Agency can do something, it can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. So the EU not necessarily being a democracy, relying too much on the EU in defending our democracies and the rule of law in our states, could also be a mistake, because we need to think about reforming the EU first before we give it too much power. So in a way, we can complain about it, but we can also say that probably the fact that the EU is not omnipotent is also our blessing, rather than something that we should bemoan.
I see. Thank you. And now I let me ask Eva, as I mentioned, she was in the conversation yesterday as well, and heard some other comments from Gábor as well. So Eva, building also our discussion in Hungarian yesterday, would you add anything to the summary I read from Gábor?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation. Definitely, I think it was kind of provocative introductional remarks on behalf of Gábor, how useful we can consider the EU, and what is the role of the EU in this whole situation when we assess the level of media freedom and press freedom across the EU countries. I tend to agree with him on the problems that happened with the Hungarian media system, and the problem that the EU has not opened investigations on certain topics, such as the Klubrádió licensing problem, also the competition side of CESMA. So there are some striking issues. But I think first what we should do is maybe to see, what role the EU has and what opportunities the EU has to intervene. And then we could investigate maybe, what kind of reforms we need to strengthen the safeguards that the EU can offer to its member states. So basically, the EU has two basic laws that ensure the opportunity to regulate press freedom. And one is the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, and the other is the Charter of Fundamental Rights. And based on these instruments, there are a few laws that are in effect, and there are some others that are still in draft phase, and that might change the whole system across the EU. So I think it really depends, how active the EU is and what is the active role the EU is taking. And what I can see, and especially relying on Vera Jourova, the Commissioner for Values and Transparency, who is taking a more proactive role in this whole debate, she stated in February in a press statement that Europe has underestimated the role of media in upholding democracy. And I think, and I can sense that the EU has started to understand the importance of the role of the media in this process. And of course, what Gábor was referring to is the audiovisual media services. That's a bit problematic, because there are no clear and enforceable safeguards in that directive. But there are others. There is the whistleblower directive as well that also regulates press freedom, and there are some, new initiative like the anti-strategic lawsuit against public participation directive that seems to be that the EU is taking a lead on that, and also the Digital Services Act and Digital Markets Act. So what I can see now is that based on the European Democracy Action Plan, it is very likely that the EU will take a more active role, both in legislation, but also maybe enforcing the existing rules, such as the competition rules, investigating the complaints that are on the table of the Commission.
Thank you, Eva, and yes, I'm thinking that one more thing to bridge the conversation yesterday and the one today is that yesterday we were also talking about the role of the Media Council in Hungary, and I raised that I would like to put on the table now as well that I myself think that the key for press freedom in Europe and freedom of speech in general, including coverage of slam poetry by public service media, which is now in Hungary silent about slam poetry, a major Hungarian free speech movement, because slam poetry is critical. So a key would be just to put into the Audiovisual Media Services Directive or whatever binding mandatory common European regulation that no member state can create regulation that allows the governing majority of any time or any other social group, an oligarch, a group of oligarchs, whoever, whatever social group, to have dominant influence in the Media Council, which decides who can get an airwave or who can enter the market in some other ways. And I think it's possible to do that. This principle comes from the Hungarian Constitutional Court, which laid down in 1992 this principle that any kind of social group can have dominant influence in the bodies which supervise the media system. And I think we can do that. It's possible to create such a binding federalist regulation in the European Union, and I would love to hear your views, whether you think it's necessary and possible. And of course, behind that question, there is the question that to what extent we want to make our common Europe a federalist structure, and to what extent we say that we want to keep things to be decided on the national level, that in the Czech Republic, in Poland, in Slovakia, in Hungary, among the countries represented now in terms of slam poetry, the question is whether we say we want to decide it in our country, in our national parliaments, or we want to say that in our common European level, we want to create a safeguard. My proposal is that we need to create such a safeguard to protect press freedom against restriction of freedom of press in such a way in any member state. But now I pass the word and we just listen the experts. And now I ask András Arató, as he's the leader of Klubrádió for long, a radio station which became world famous by fighting for its voice for the last 11 years. And here I mention as well at this event that Julia Váradi, who was with us yesterday from Klubrádió, called my own mother, the mother of Klubrádió, and my late mother really loved this radio station, fought for this. And as all other events of the Undergrund Slam Academy, this event is also meant to continue the heritage of my wonderful school teacher mother, Eva Gömöri. András, please share with us your thoughts.
Thank you. Well, let me show this, for example. if it's readable, okay. We do not need masks today. Well, this is not just that I have 3 minutes to answer to a question which was put through 8 minutes or something like that, but I tried to do it. The approach of Gabor and all of you who has been speaking already was the side of the institutional side of the question. There is this media council, which is not else but a party body, and it's not only symbolic that it contains of only Fidesz members, Fidesz delegates. But I'd like to I have a very long story in my fight against this power. My first hearing in the EU was in 2012, when the similar fight was against Klubrádió, and its frequency was to be taken away. But in that period, there existed in Hungary independent cards. Today, we don't have any chance to win at the tribunals. But let me emphasize another side, but a very significant side of the whole thing and the whole dictatorship over the media, and that is money. When Orbán and his government came back into the power because they had learned much after losing their first period in 2002, and they began their fight immediately against all elements of balance, checks and balances, and their enemy and the enemy of all autocratic system, the first line of their enemies is the press, the independent free press. And the first step was to dominate the whole advertising market in the country. On one part, the Hungarian state, its institutions and its companies became the dominant actor of the advertising market. That was one part. And the other part was pressing the private actors of the market and causing them fears that they will, first of all, they will not get contracts if they advertise in the independent media, and for second, they will get tax control, unexpected press controls. Very soon, this process was very fast, and very soon the mentioned state part of the market, if we can speak at all about market, in a year they became dominant, and now I think it is more than the half of the advertising or communication market. Its financing comes from the state. In our case, Klubrádió lost 90% of its income from 2010 to 2011. We used to have about 2.5 million euros yearly income, and it went down to about 30, 40, 50, 100,000. So we lost our living immediately. And while it was a brief idea to try something else, to create a new model, to put, let's say, a commercial private radio station on the basis of donations. It was very successful because during these last 11 years, we got about more than 5, almost 6 million euros as donation. And not big donator, not big sums arrived to our accounts, but pensioners and people with low salary found Klubrádió very significant, and they decided to give us money to survive. We arrived to this year after that great support, and on the 14th of February we lost our frequency, and since then we got more donations from our listeners than formerly, and the number of our listeners is not smaller than it used to be when we had the terrestrial wave. To return back to the general problem and the general situation, when the independent media lost its basis of their surviving financial basis. They became weak, as a lot of them went bankrupt, and a lot of them became easy preys for the oligarchical investors. They are not real investors. They are party close and Orbán close figures who became rich shortly after 2010. The problem is that medias like Klubrádió did not find sources from the European Union. These are not comparing to a budget of a country. These are not great sums, but very significant one for our survival. Meanwhile, our enemy, who wants to destroy the whole independent media, gets a huge sum of money based on the European taxpayers. So this is not only unbalanced and unjust, but it is very strange that those who are fighting freedom, so-called freedom fight against the European Union, get their finance from there. So it is unique in the history that a freedom fighter gets its financing from its enemy. So I will not go on with this, because until 7 you want to close this session. So money is a question not only technical and practical, but really a moral question. Who is supported by the European Union's budget?
Thank you, András, and now let me ask John O'Sullivan, the head of the Danube Institute, and I have been participating in many good discussions, mostly organized by him. But once he was part of a conference I organized on so-called hate speech, and always enjoyed John's comments. So please, John, let us hear your views.
Well, first of all, Peter, thank you for inviting me to take part. I may just pick up, if I may, the slogan on your T-shirt, and I think you can probably remember the syllogism goes as follows: dissent is the highest form of patriotism. Treason is the highest form of dissent. Therefore, treason is the highest form of patriotism. So I don't actually, I think that you should be cautious about that slogan. Now, the second thing I would say is, I'm grateful to you for inviting me. You mentioned we're all conservatives. I think I'm going to say that your colleagues will be hard-pressed to defeat me in my conservatism, so to speak. I'm out there on their right. And I therefore tend not to get invited to panels on journalism that often, about once every decade. But the one about 3 decades ago, on February the 14th, 1989, in Columbia Journalism School in New York, we had a very illuminating discussion about the press, official secrecy, and press freedom. It concentrated on things that people thought were important at the time. For example, people talked a lot about the Pentagon Papers, the New York Times, about Mrs. Thatcher's attempt to prevent the IRA going on television and so on. Quite illuminating and interesting discussions. But at the very end of that, a man in the hall said, "News has just come in. I wonder if the panel would care to comment on the fact that in Tehran, the Ayatollah Khomeini has pronounced a fatwa on Salman Rushdie for the book Satanic Verses." Now, 3 members of the panel did not take that at all seriously. I was one of them. The 4th member was Christopher Hitchens, and he warned us at the time this was an extremely significant threat to liberty in general and freedom of the press. He said, don't think that because it's this elderly Islamic cleric far away, that now we will not have to go to a lot of effort in order to protect Salman Rushdie. And of course, that was true. Not only that, but I would say that that was 32 years ago. For most of that period, the principal threat to freedom of the press hasn't come from Western governments. It hasn't come from governments in Central Europe. It has come from, of course, the attempts of Islamist extremists to attempt to prevent, well, first of all, the production of the cartoons in Denmark, but since then, of course, a whole series of outrages. For example, the murder of the Charlie Hebdo journalists. On each of these occasions, the Western governments and other governments have issued statements of support for the people who were attacked, but they have also collaborated, as have newspapers, as have publishing houses, with what was going to be with what the Islamist extremists wanted. The best example of that is the Yale University Press, which published an entire heavyweight volume on the Danish cartoon controversy. But at the end of that, they didn't actually publish the cartoons in the volume. So we have been treading on eggshells, but not because of the actions of Western governments. Now, lately, a new set of challenges has emerged. And those challenges have been a collaboration, really, between the big tech, between ideologized professions, for example, the journalists on the New York Times who drove Barry Weiss out because they didn't, they essentially did not agree with her political views. The New York Magazine, which drove Andrew Sullivan out because they felt that he no longer represented the kind of, well, progressive views that they wanted in their magazine. In the American elections, we saw that the press was overwhelmingly biased in favor of the Democratic candidate, to the extent of actually not publishing stories, or in the case of big tech, not allowing those stories to be discussed on their network. So we now face a situation, I think, in which the kind of regulatory use of regulations by government to strengthen their position in the media as vis-a-vis the opposition is much less important than these other attacks. Now, it's the topic here, of course. I have to say, I think most of the discussion has been a little bit too technocratic. I would maybe say too European. It's relying on committees of this body, of that organization. Now, you raised the question, federalism. What role can the federal authorities play in increasing the diversity of opinion in the media here? And the answer is, I don't have much confidence in that. You know, to complain about the fact that the EU doesn't take actions against governments whose actions you disapprove of, the EU is a cartel of governments. That's what it is. It's not likely to do the things you want it to do. Most of the time. It may occasionally, if you put significant public pressure on it, but most of the time it won't. And that's something we just have to be realistic about. And I went back and looked at some of the proposals in the past recently from Nellie Kroes and others about European control of the media. I have to honestly say, Peter, they were at least as interfering and pettifogging and binding as the kind of thing you are complaining about. It was a proposal that the EU should license journalists, and that if they didn't live up to, quote, European values, well, some action would have to be taken. So I don't think you want to go down that road. Finally, what road should you go down? Well, I'm on the record as believing that Europe should have a First Amendment. Now, clearly, you don't have a European constitution, so it can't exactly be a constitutional amendment. But I think the simple words of the First Amendment saying you cannot pass laws preventing the expression of opinion, Congress shall make no law. That has been very useful, not completely useful. It isn't a panacea. It's coming under threat now in the United States itself. But the idea of a simple rule governments can't interfere in this way would be much more useful than the kind of serpentine, expert, technocratic, and detached systems of regulation that you've got now, but you want to be run in a different way.
Thank you very much, John, for your complex set of comments, and I will ask now Vesna from the Center for Media, Data and Society at Central European University to provide her comments.
Hi, everyone, and also from Ranking Digital Rights. I work there as a program manager. Thanks for the invitation. And I think I would circle back to your original question, Peter, which is the title of the event. And I think I agree with what Eva was saying, and I also agree partly with what's written by Gabor. So for me, it's my observation is probably more like a bigger picture observation, and I feel like the answer to your question is that there is a legal safeguard in a sense, there are legal safeguards, just like Eva was saying. We have the Article 10, we have the European Convention on Human Rights and all those other legal mechanisms, but it's just not being enforced at the moment. So just like in the US having the First Amendment, or having these legal safeguards in the EU, it's obvious that it's not enough for press freedom. And that's because when we speak about press freedom, there are other factors beyond legal safeguards. And I think that was also what was said by other panelists, that there are economic factors, there are political, cultural factors like media ownership, media pluralism, how press freedom is being perceived by political actors. And if these different factors create an unfavorable environment for press freedom, it's not possible to enforce the legal safeguards, right? So I would bounce back the question, and my question is when the broader circumstances make it impossible to enforce the right of freedom of expression, and therefore press freedom is at threat, what kind of rules and systems or actors are able to protect press freedom? Because I'm not sure if legal safeguards are enough here.
Thank you, Vesna, and now I ask Eva, as she spoke somewhat shorter in the first round. And mentioned that I forgot to mention at the beginning in this conversation that she participates on behalf of the Civil Liberties Union for Europe, a Berlin-based, great Berlin-based organization. So Eva, do you have any comments on those? And if you could also bring it back. You don't have to, just if you can help bring it back to this focus that whether in the EU we can create some helpful common regulation, keeping in mind also the warning what John said, that the regulation from EU can also further restrict press freedom in some ways.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to react to some that had been raised by others. One is this, European Constitution idea. I think, and this is, this is the huge difference between the First Amendment and the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the EU, that Europe doesn't really have a living constitution. These provisions have not been tested yet. And I can see, or I can envision, a role for the Court of the European Union to base its decisions on the Charter. And there are, some recent decisions and also some upcoming decisions that will discuss this issue. So if you think about the mandatory upload filter debate that we had during the copyright legislation. And there is a Polish case pending at the court. And on the 15th of July, there will be an important decision about the constitutionality of upload filters, or whether it's against freedom of expression or not to apply such a technical help for these big tech companies. So I think these stronger understanding of common free speech at the EU level is maybe coming, but I fully agree that the European Union is an economical union of the governments, and therefore, well, it's less likely that it would intervene in certain fields. However, there are certain changes, and I think one of these is the rule of law mechanism. So if we can consider this rule of law mechanism as a key instrument, and if the funding, access to the EU funding will depend on the respect of fundamental democratic values, that might be a game changer in the near future for some of the EU countries. I think there are significant problems across the EU, and it's not only Hungary's problem. So I know we are discussing here mostly the Hungarian problems, but there are so many other countries that suffer of media regulation that did not protect media freedom in a country. So media ownership, if you take one, and we know the Hungarian problem, or I believe that most of our guests are aware of the problem in the Hungarian media landscape. But if you think about Italy, where the RAI has dominate most of the market share, or the Czech Republic, where the Prime Minister, Andrej Babiš, owns 30% of the private media. Poland also faces the same problem. So there is a tendency across Europe with media ownership, where Hungary can be considered as a flagship country, but there are others who follow. And I think this is what Vera Jourova was talking about, that now it seems that the EU has started to understand that media freedom is very important, connecting to the rule of law and the level of democracy. And therefore the independence of the media regulatory bodies, self-censorship in itself, the problem with media ownership, these are problems that are present in many EU countries. And as I see now, and as I sense now, there are some kind of willingness at the EU level to intervene with some kind of a regulation. I don't think it specifically will focus on press freedom, but segments of press freedom, such as media ownership, that is really against the EU values, what happened in Hungary and some of the member states that I've already referred to.
Thank you very much, Eva. And now I ask András again, if possible, just in like 2 minutes, and then John, and then Vesna, and Vesna, you could also talk a little more if you wish, just as you spoke shortly in the first round, and then let us hear the slams from Anatol, Maciej, and Thomas, and myself, and bring the sometimes heavyweight legal conversation, which is very important and helpful, to another level by the slams and the following conversation. So, András, how do you see this? Are you hopeful that the European Union at the end of the day can somehow help the situation here in Hungary or in another member state, or we just have to fix it ourselves in Hungary at the next election?
In 2 minutes, well, it's ridiculous, but just let me mention one thing, that after tomorrow there will be a verdict in a case of Klubrádió, a case when we went against the Media Council because they did not prolong our license despite the description of the law. And last week, the European Committee had a decision about this case, and they recognized that it is against law, and so on and so on. It is very curious that on Thursday, the Hungarian Supreme Court, the Hungarian Kuria, it is in its name in Hungarian, in the shadow of this decision of the European Committee, what will they decide? Do they have any glance on the laws, European and Hungarian laws, or no, or not? If they say that the Media Council was right when they denied and rejected our appeal for the prolongation of the license, that shows that the Hungarian law for the media is against the European law, is against the European regulation. So this would show a huger problem of the Hungarian media system. And just one remark, so in short, that will be after tomorrow, and it is worth to pay attention for that event. What is going to happen? We appealed for the reopening of the case because based on the new decision of the European Committee. And just one remark about the role of the different ships. So if Hungary is the flagship of this army against the media freedom, or then the first it is in the first line that this must be put out of the row at first, and then other elements against the media freedom will follow their fate. In 2 minutes, well, that's.
Thank you, András. You see, in 2 minutes, it's still possible to say a lot. Thank you. John?
First of all, the discussion of state radio, state television, I think it persuades me that I think it was Peter Molnar was unwise not to accept a suggestion from Viktor Orban, I think in 2006, who said, why don't we adopt the Italian media system in which the Christian Democrats have one television service and the left has the other. That wasn't accepted, and I don't think under the previous administration the official state media was particularly friendly to the opposition. Now, when you look at what Eva was saying, is very interesting. I would draw her attention, though, to the fact that there's a second. Well, it's not a First Amendment, but there is a Charter of Rights in the Canadian system. And that, of course, is far more like the Charter of Rights in Europe. And one of the interesting things about it, it has done absolutely nothing to protect press freedom. In fact, it has protected the human rights courts, which are not actually courts, but they are tribunals. And they have again and again subjected journalists who take unfashionable views to what are very costly, expensive, time-wasting exercises in defending their journalism. I think that those, a genuine rights system would have done something about that, would have stopped these kind of starchings. Why didn't they? Because I think if we're going to be honest here, in a big social clash, and that's what we're talking about, government and opposition and people lining up on both sides, the judges in most of the European countries and in Canada and in other countries are the representatives not of all the people, but generally speaking of the social class that provides the bureaucrats, the diplomats, the officials. That's certainly true in Israel. It's certainly true until recently when Supreme Court politics became much more divisive and genuinely contested in America too. Now, if that's the case, the interpretation of the charters by judges are not going to be regarded by half the population as being judicial decisions. They're going to be seen as political decisions favoring one side or another, dressed up in a philosophical legal language. And I don't think that that exactly is the way forward in democracy. It is you're in a system of liberal democracy. Yes, you need liberalism and democracy. But in the European system, we have been seeing liberalism getting a far larger share of the decisions and democracy a shrinking one. And I think that would be the result in spades of making press and media regulation a European responsibility rather than a national one. And I don't think that would be a good thing for press freedom.
Thank you, John. Vesna, at the end of this part.
I don't think I understand. Maybe I don't. Maybe I don't understand. Maybe I don't agree with what was said. I think it's always a question of also like risk assessment, and like you also like I agree. Like you have to look at the local environment, because not everything is working everywhere. Like we can see it in content moderation, like there are limitations to international human rights law, right? So like it's not always going to, like you have to do impact assessments and see like how certain laws work in local environments. But I agree with Eva, and I think it would be beneficial for a lot of the countries where press freedom is under a lot of pressure and political pressure and also like financial pressure to have some kind of like European level, if not regulation, I don't know what is the right word, maybe regulation. I think that's for the future to figure out.
Thank you very much. So after the first hour, we just see how big and difficult the issue is in front of us, with the highlighted example of Klubrádió. And now let's turn to the slammers and bring in, like in 50 minutes or so, 4 pieces of slam poetry, after which I look forward to hear the questions from the slammers. And I ask which one of you would start. Is there a volunteer, or I shall ask? If we can go in alphabetical order of the countries, Anatol, can you start?
So I think it's up to me.
Yeah. It's so, I'm so happy that you are here, and it was such a pleasure when you were here in Budapest, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. It's Anatol Svahilec from Czech Republic, and I'm very pleased to be a part of this live stream. And well, so let's move to the main part of my presence here. So I try to create a text about this topic. I have never wrote a text about like this specific topic, so I wrote some kind of like short thing which it's called Headlines. So, and I'm so pleased to present this world premiere of this text to you. So thanks for your attention, ladies and gentlemen, Anatol Svahilec, and Headlines. All media in the world should be independent, censorship-free, and free speech supporting. Print that sentence in Belarus and you will get all in the world depend, censorship, and free supporting. Sport news. Unnamed Chinese athlete won both long-range runs, ski slalom, and football match alone. Lonely Planet magazine. Everything with the nature is fine, and global warming prevents oceans from getting dry. Tullamore Dew dry whiskey, drier than an empty bottle. Read this by now. Nowadays, bullshit. Good times are gone, said former Prime Minister in exclusive interview. Point of view in a feuilleton of our prestigious commentator, view which goes in the right way. Breaking. Highway to the south is closed because of repair. Trips and immigration to the countries in that way banned. Bang! 3 dead after shooting in a grocery shop on Main Street. None of them holding a gun, but they still deserve that anyway. Desserts can cause obesity and also contribute to a pleasant afternoon. No, we do not publish this just because to shame Croatians, but after this, you have to admit it's disgusting. Discussion about infrastructural investments is not just the real thing our party should be focused on. Parties, not recommended. All the fun in politics concentrated to the hands of the Central Committee. Tea is the drink for conscious people, and our editors have never heard about any other kind of warm drink. War on drugs, pedophile porn, non-smiling people, and Uganda combined to one campaign to save public financial sources. Your sources should be no longer anonymized, to prove them right or to be sent to jail. Jails to be proved the calmest places to read the news. News is the thing which somewhere can get you in jail. Is your press under pressure? Press PK to leave the comment. Comment is the thing which somewhere can get you in jail. You jealous, better don't judge. Because we heard about you. We published text about you because you published text about us. And that's insult for everybody. So you know what? Don't read, don't stare, don't care, don't be interested, don't inform, so you would be involved, accused, shamed, and worry, because sorry, but we decide who will and who will not to be part of the story. So that's my piece for this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Anatol, for a first try on the subject in the slam, in this conversation. And now I ask Maciej from Krakow, if I'm not mistaken. Are you from Krakow? Maciej, do you hear us?
Yes, you are right. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
Yes, we hear you.
You are right. I am from Krakow. The pleasure is mine to see you everybody today. I am very happy, and I prepared a short speech about the topic. Okay, so it will be just a minute, please. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
And can you show me? No.
I don't see you.
Why are you afraid to show your face? Why are you afraid to show your face? Where has your freedom gone? If your country is free and you live in the heart of Europe, you have nothing to fear. You have nothing to fear. You have the right to be different. You have the right to be free. If your country respects your full rights, why are you afraid to show your face? Why are you afraid to show your face? There is no guarantee or prescription for freedom. There is no guarantee or prescription. Why are you afraid to show your face? Freedom is the people around you. To show your face? There is no prescription for freedom gone. Freedom is poetry, free and you live in the heart of Europe. You have nothing to poetry. Freedom you have nothing to fear. You have the right to be different. You have the right to be free. If your country respects your full rights, why are you afraid to show your face? Why are you afraid to show your face? There is no guarantee or prescription for freedom. There is no guarantee or prescription for freedom. Freedom is the people around you. There is no prescription for freedom. Freedom is poetry. Freedom is poetry. Freedom is poetry. Freedom is poetry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Maciej. And now I ask Tomás.
Good. Hi, everybody. I'm very, very proud that I can be here today. It's very strange because the press situation in Slovakia is generally, well, I think, best in Visegrad 4, unless that mob kills the journalist 3 years ago. So it's very, very strange that you have free speech unless someone kills you. So this is my poem about it. I don't want to slam it anymore, but now is as a council with the murderers today. So this is why I reading this today. So yeah, so let's start. Do you know what this poem will change? Nothing. The bullet is stronger than a pen. The lie is the old true and the strongest device of masters of war. Carelessness remains. Do you know what this poem will change? Absolutely nothing. We will go to the work, back home, to the children, to the cemetery, to plow the fields for the masters. We will go to the market, to the school, to the pub, to the elections. And do you know what this poem will change? Nothing. The young bride, the white cherry, got her veil by blood and lead. For at least she could think better. The groom was deprived of heart, for he could no longer say any other yes. Enough of emotion, enough of defiance. The head and the chest must be prohibited. And do you know what this poem will change? Nothing. Protest marches, fiery candles, running tears. Protest marches, fiery candle, running tears. Protest marchings, fiery candles, running tears. We have got this all in the era of Palach, Zajíc, Remiáš, Tupi. What did fists and legs and tears and the mouths of our poems, of our deeds, what did they change in the face of death? Nothing. We are too eastwards. Ruined Kosovo, too eastwards, it will pass. Bombs in Syria, too eastwards, it will pass. The Hungarian and the Czechs engage with China, too eastwards, it will pass. Bullets for the lovers. Goodbye, blue sky. Are we still too eastwards? We, the younger brothers of laughing beasts, fireworks of exploded cars illuminated our nurseries here in the black hole of Europe. Our video games, porn, car factories, and Czech version of Netflix really the only thing binding us with democracy? We never had our colonial Negroes, Algerians, Native Americans, or Islanders to have them consumed by our own greediness. So we must kick each other, shut each other. And do you know what this poem will change? Nothing. It's a snap to gain a monopoly in an anthill of 5 million. Memories of childhood rimmed by an insane whisper that pours 2 words through the clenched teeth. Mafia state. Shut the fuck up and shuffle your legs so your mommy can be proud of you. No one cares about your tears. And do you know what this poem will change? Nothing. If you remain really, really silent, you will hear the borders grow. Those of us who believes in some idea of freedom will run away, away as it has always been, away from communist secret servicing leading the state, away from Russian influence, away from everyday impossibility of nothing. The West News will bring outrage statements on the hell of reality's account in the unknown language, and we will slowly web a new curtain from death, fear, intimidation, and violence. And I'm afraid this poem will change absolutely nothing about that.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And now I will do mine at the end of this part. This is a text I wrote when we were doing a European Citizen Initiative to put the proposal on the table of all common European institutions to create common European regulation for media ownership and regulatory bodies. Unfortunately, 1 million signature was needed to have the proposal submitted, and we failed to protect 1 million signature, but we can try it again. And this is a participatory poem, so I would like to ask you, I hope it will work in the Zoom as well. I would like to ask you that when I raise my hand, please say with me, it depends on me. Let's try it.
It depends on me.
On me.
Wonderful. Thank you. One more try.
It depends
on me.
Thank you. And it's a good idea. You can say it in your own language if you wish, not necessarily in English. One more try. When I raise my hand, please say, it depends on me. Oh, wonderful. Okay. Freedom of the press slam.
It depends on me.
Tell me, O muse of freedom, in order to make Europe and the whole world see that the Hungarian is free and taking shower not only in water but also in words, not at all is like the one who fears censorship and knows about freedom of speech and freedom of the press that if there are shoelaces in your shoe, it does not mean that you are free. And don't pretend that reality has background music. You too have only one life. Don't let it be destroyed. Sign the Citizen Initiative for the Diversity of European Press, for freedom of the press as signing the initiative counts as rebelling against arbitrary power? Sure. Will the girls who deny sex until you rebel, referring to Aristophanes' Lysistrate, accept signing the initiative for press freedom as rebelling for freedom? Sure. Oh, then where can I sign it? Danny? It does not take a lot of courage. It's silly not to be part of it. Be at least a little bit brave. Listen to Pericles, who knew that liberty is the secret of happiness and courage is the secret of liberty. You are not a grain. You are a free human being. Catch the rhythm in this as well as in music Buddhism. Be happy, free, and brave by recognizing that. And then it gets possible that even the sky can come down, and then the gods sitting on the brink of clouds can see how much each and every person can do, not only against something, but also for something, for free flow of news and thoughts, for the freedom of the press, whatever press means. You put your life up on the internet anytime. Do you put up your life on freedom? You don't have to risk it. You can just choose your values, and you can choose freedom equal to everybody else's freedom.
Right.
What else you want? What else worthy of you? What else you have got to? Well, you also need love. Freedom of love, these two, a poet tells, who believed in, even when he could not, that now everybody can believe in, that freedom of the press. And why do you reject that guy if you like him for a long time? You said you really want him. He does not rebel against arbitrary power. He doesn't stand for press freedom. Then tell him to like not only you as a girl, but also stand for freedom of the press with his signature. Oh, then the Hungarian name will be beautiful again. Petőfi, a 19th century Hungarian poet, wrote in February 1848, before the revolution in following March, freedom of the press is an omnipotent verb. Not a joke, a verb. Everybody's shirt, you also need to put it on. Like with your signature, what your girlfriend, boyfriend likes with his signature. And you can see that they are also not taken away by police, as we are not in a dictatorship. You just need to be a little bit brave, as they are not the only ones who believe that. Don't wait for an order or for someone else, as then she would wait for you. Don't give up. Don't go down on your knees. Don't imagine big danger. Don't miss this chance. Come to your sense. Notice freedom of the press and freedom of speech in Europe have diverse sources to get the data for your words and your views. Let your views be yours. And with the thought courage of Béni Kálai, another 19th century Hungarian, question your own views in order to let conversation be, because it's also true for this, that conversation, if you never stood up for freedom, the door opens for you as well. Come on, stand up for freedom of the press. Let participation be the fashion that does not prognosticate you, but tells about who you are. Thank you very much for the participation. And sorry, maybe the participatory part was a long shot for Zoom, but thank you very much. And I hope that this message goes through. I think every single one of us in our Visegrad 4 countries or wherever can really make a change for freedom of the press and press freedom, especially with the internet in hand and with the wonderful movement of slam poetry. But now, Anatol, Maciej, Thomas, in this order, please raise a question or a set of questions to Eva, Vesna, András, and John about what we just discussed in press freedom in Europe so far.
All right, thanks. So maybe I would like to thank Eva for mentioning the situation in Czech Republic, and maybe it's just like I'm mainly curious about this, and I hope that question or topic wouldn't be like too much, let's say, large or what, but I would like to ask about your like information and view on, let's say, Czech media scene, let's say, and because, you know, I should be longer, so it's the situation with our prime minister is much more complicated than just the press media, which is pretty obvious. I believe there are like huge controversies, and I think we should stop calling controversies because it's the hard facts. Then there are like huge corruption with the EU funds. There's coming elections on October, and that, you know, like a press thing could move with the things a lot. So my question is about your international view on a Czech media scene. Thank you.
Thank you, Anatol. Eva, would you?
Well, I'm not an expert in the Czech media scene. However, what we can see is that the Czech Republic has started to erode the level of press freedom and media freedom in the Czech Republic, And especially it's a very warning sign when a prime minister is the owner of the 30% of the media outlets. That's something that I don't think any of us, or not us, but anyone would agree with. This is against the competition, this is against the access to information, and this is also against, to make sure that people get access to information so that they can make informed decision in the upcoming elections. And I think this is the key issue here. So what kind of instruments we believe and ownership is a key issue here. So internal and external pluralism of the media outlets are key, and the access to debates, political debates in a country. And of course there is, cultural questions, and of course it's a question of, that's what kind of information they provide. And as Joan mentioned before, the public service media, especially in the Eastern Bloc or the Eastern part of Europe, was always captured by the ruling governmental party. However, the level of the capture was different. I think this is a significant difference that we have been living through recently, that besides the direct influence, the lack of debates and the lack of the possibility to get access to information, this is something that really compromises the value of the EU, and this is where I see the role of the EU, that they might be willing to intervene. And not to forget, and maybe this is a very personal issue, that Vera Jourova, the commissioner who will be responsible for any kind of media legislation, she's coming from the Czech Republic. So I'm pretty sure that the EU commissioner is following closely the regional development in media freedom.
Thank you, Eva. And I asked the other I asked the other experts, András, John, and Vesna, to keep their thoughts for this question as well, if they have some, and add them to their responses to Tomás and Maciej. And now I ask Maciej to raise a question or some questions.
Okay. Listen, I'm not the politician, I'm the poet, so I don't like the politicians. But I think that we have the same problem in Poland and in Hungary with the media, yeah? And I have the general question, because I don't know it's good to take any regulation, because I think the problem is because the media freedom depends on the civilization level of the whole society. So this is the progress. This is if we developed the civilization level, it will be better. And this is the question for everybody of you. But I know this is the problem and the big process.
Thank you, Maciej. Who would comment on that? And you can also comment on Anatol's question.
I don't have the answer, but I have an interesting finding from a previous study as a response to this question. And it was a study conducted by OSAP, I think 4 or 3 years ago, and it was about it was a new type of research, and we were trying to figure it out how people see different European values like press freedom in a lot of different countries. Poland and Hungary was included as well. I don't remember the findings about Poland, but I remember that in Hungary there was a question about I think 50% of those people who thought that freedom of the press is the most important value in democracy. 50% of those also agreed that the government should not allow public media to criticize the government. And like that contradiction, I think, really shows that if there is no like clear understanding of like what press freedom should be about within the society, it's very hard also like to expect citizens to step up in favor of press freedom or to support independent media or to understand like how public media should function. So my answer is that I think it is very important. I don't really know like how to address this problem in countries like Hungary or Poland when the government has a different incentive. So they are not really like in favor of conscious citizens, I think, who think press freedom is important and understand what press freedom should be about. Yeah.
Can I just pick up on that, Peter?
Yes, sure. Please, John.
Well, I think that's an interesting argument. And the problem, of course, of any kind of intrusions, restrictions on press freedom would be much easier to solve if people were more critical, if they were, as previous speaker said, in a way more civilized, the whole in the whole society. Unfortunately, the traditional answer then is to say, let's have more education. But it now looks from some of the kind of surveys that the last speaker mentioned in the United States that more education does not produce a more critical and self-critical population. It produces, in fact, a more, I suppose, indoctrinated or ideologized, terms like that would have to be used. And that's very alarming, because that's one of the things we used to be, we thought we could solve it by, in a sense, educating people better. We're educating them more, but we're not educating them better. And that's something that is a real problem for all our societies. And I would also just add that the problems of the press freedom are less matters of partisan politics in a lot of countries now, say Britain and America particularly, but some European countries as well. It's not partisan divisions that are so important. What it is it's a new kind of division in which you have the people who've been to university, who are globalists in the sense of able to travel easily. They have academic and other qualifications, which means they can be employed anywhere. And then the mass of people who remain, it's about 25% of the population now. And then there's about 50% of the population who live at home most of the time, don't go farther. They are educated, and maybe they're quite well educated to a secondary level, but they tend to have a different outlook. And that was seen in the Brexit debate, and this is very important, in which the overwhelming elite media and communications, particularly the BBC, were against Brexit. And they were amazed to discover in the population at large, there was this strong support for it. And that support has not diminished in the last 4 or 5 years since the vote. It's actually got stronger. And I think we have to begin to think of how it is. What is the education system creating a divide rather than healing a divide? And how can we deal with that? Because
thank you, John. Thank you for that thoughtful comment as well. And András, would you say something now, or shall we hear Tomás?
Yes, just a few words. So I think that the state of media freedom is a sign of the general state of democracy. And in these countries, and first of all in Hungary, there is no tradition for democratic system. So the consequence is that generally people in Hungary are not interested in the different institutions of freedom, and among them the freedom of press is not very significant for the Hungarians, and they are not interested in the state of the constitutional court of prosecution and so on, because the Hungarian population for hundreds of years did not practice democracy. And of course, it's a question of culture too, and being cultivated, the inhabitants of a country that may have an effect, how much power, an autocratic power can do with its people. Of course, we are not going to solve these problems in the next few decades, but the last 10 years show how strong the effect of a negative negative changes in the education system and so on, and this could be cured out only in a very, very long period. And of course, for having the chance to cure out this, we need a free press too.
Thank you, András. That's very important too. And now I ask Tomás. Tomás, please raise your question.
As I see the situation in media in Slovakia, there is two main problems which I see. The first problem is religion, and the second problem is centralization of media. And let me explain this. Like this first problem of religion, it's, for example, we have national broadcasting about women's rights, but we didn't invite any women in that. So there is 4 men, 3 of them are really strong Catholic believers, even the moderators of the debate, and there is 1 man against it, but we doesn't discuss. We make this fight between the traditional national religion point of view and the others. This is I think a great problem in Slovak media. So first question is maybe how avoid that, and the second problem, which I think it doesn't mention in this debate maybe, is the centralization. Like we are 5 million state, very small one. But there is no news or very, very small news from the other cities than the capital. So the political party, which was the main party, can really steal the half of country from, for example, for the east of it. But we have no news because the media have no journalists on the east of Slovakia, no redactions, stuff like that is. So I consider this like a great problem because there is no news outside of the capital. So the media, like national broadcasting, they're functioning like the local media for the capital city, which are fucked up. So this is my 2 questions: how to avoid the religion control of the media, and how to maybe make the rule or something like this of the centralization of just one city or just one part of country when we have to be national.
Thank you. Who would respond to that? While you are thinking, I add another question that arrived. John Small writes the question: Do you think that there should be an EU Central Public Broadcasting Corporation outside the control of any one country, like a European Broadcasting Corporation? Do you think that would help? I don't mean to step over Tomás' question. I just, while you think about how to comment on that, I add this question, and let me add my own question, which is about Klubrádió, because listening to all the thoughtful comments and sad comments, I'm thinking that Klubrádió is in a way the tip of the iceberg. And it comes to mind also because the question we got on YouTube mentions public broadcasting. Klubrádió is a very good public broadcaster in the sense of providing public service, news and cultural programs and all sorts of that. And a huge injustice could take place in our Europe that a media authority could take away the license of that radio without any sound justification, not even trying to justify it. And I wrote several articles on it, and in one, and then I stopped the question. I highlighted an additional thing that in Budapest, even after the Holocaust, a large Jewish population has been living. And many Holocaust survivors have also listened to Klubrádió. Very old people as well, for whom it's not easy to jump on the internet, for whom it was crucial to have the old radio set in the kitchen, in the living room, and next to her or his bed to tune on Klubrádió. And I think it's disgusting to take away the airwave and take away the radio from also other old people, but also from Holocaust survivor old people. And we just have to fix it. So my question specifically to András, how do you see the way to fix it, to get the airwave back? András mentioned several ways, shortly mentioned how Klubrádió is keeping up the good fight. But what is your hope, András? What will be finally the way to get the airwave back? Because we will have it back. Let's make it clear. We will have Klubrádió's airwave back. And so I just wanted to put it on the table as well for all of you joining the question that Thomas raised and the question on YouTube.
Well, what should I speak about religion and the state of our state? I am an atheist, so my situation is very difficult in a country which declares itself as a Christian country. Meanwhile, and even in the constitution, or there is no constitution in Hungary, in the basic law it is written that this country is based on Christian values. Meanwhile, the whole Europe is based on the Christian, Jewish, and classical culture. So I think, I think this is a great danger. The churches are much stronger. The states are much less secular ones, as it was much healthier. Formerly. Well, I don't discuss with you about the station of Klubrádió. Of course, I agree with you, but you put the question, where is the hope? The hope is the next year's election in Hungary, because it is clear that the Orbán regime doesn't want any opposition or any critical and any independent voice in the country. And a series of different media institutions went bankrupt or were turned into a servant situation. A world famous project is the Cash Mob. Probably you heard about it. This is a foundation absolutely controlled by Fidesz, which contains almost 500 different medias, newspapers, dailies, televisions, and so on and so on. So it is clear that this is a centralized decision, a personal decision made by Orbán Prime Minister. They don't want us to exist. Probably it is very furious for them that despite the fact that the incomes were taken away, even the frequency was taken away, and we still exist. It is, how is it in English, the Monty Python picture, not the Life of Brian's, but the other classical one, where there is the black well, I don't enter into that. Well, we are figures similar like that one in the Monty Python picture. He doesn't have any arms already, he doesn't have any legs, but he's still fighting for its survival. Well, the situation is similar. It is absolutely hopeless because there is no independent court in the country. All levels of the tribunals are occupied by party fighters, party soldiers. For now, even the Supreme Court's makes decisions, verdicts absurd once, not only in the case of Klubrádió, and not only in cases where politics are involved, in any kind of case. There is no possibility to get justice service in the country. So in the frames of this system, there is no possibility neither to get back the frequency. That doesn't mean that we do not go until the end in all cases. And finally, we go to the court of the European Union. we fight, and so, well, became a kind of symbol of freedom fighters.
Thank you, András, and others, please. And Tomás, maybe would you shortly mention your question? So you were asking about concentration on the local level, or I just want to make sure that your question does not remain unanswered. But I ask others, of course, to continue after András. Just wanted to give you the opportunity to.
Yes, I'm happy to answer it.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, me. Okay. Well, look. The question of how the disputes, which particularly disputes between religions and social practices, alive in all countries, but all sides behave badly, it seems to me, when they're in power. For example, the discussion over the preamble to the European Constitution, which never in the end happened, back in the aughties, in the beginning of this century, that basically said that it would rule any mention of Christianity and God out of the preamble in the Constitution. Now, that's absurd historically. I mean, there's no doubt that other factors did play a part in the development of Europe, but Christianity was a very key one. After all, Europe used to be known as Christendom. So I deplore that, and I deplore attempts to rig the debate in other respects. It will happen, however, and all sides will try it. Now, in the case of feminism and the family, which religions take attitudes as well, it seems to me that we've almost never had fair representation in debate. That is to say, one side ensures that the only women discussing it are feminists, and the very large numbers of Christian women who don't share the feminist view of work, society, careers, and the home, are admitted only at the edge of the debate. And the same thing happens in reverse, as the speaker from Slovakia said. We've really got to be mature enough to be able to have a serious debate about the threat to the family on the one hand, and the rights of people within the family to forge their own role in the other without breaking up the family, one hopes on. And I think that it's unreasonable to, it's perfectly reasonable to raise the question as to whether or not this debate is fairly conducted, and to make sure it is. But I have to say, in the countries which are some of the most reliably democratic and liberal in their public debate, cheat on this. So I'm not hopeful that we'll get a fair debate anytime soon in all countries.
Thank you, John. Others, Eva, please.
I think the reference to Christianity is a huge question after World War II. So at least part of Europe, and especially eastern part of Europe, that suffered of the suppression of the Nazi regime, or its government voluntarily joined the Nazi regime, as Hungary did, referring only to Christianity, recall this era when other people who were not Christian were excluded from the whole system. And I think some of the debate or the controversiality of this whole situation goes back to that part, and especially in certain countries where facing, the role of its government in World War II and the role of, part of the population. And I think this is a huge difference between the Western and the Eastern part of Europe in this regard. What Tomás has mentioned, I think it's more like, an internal pluralism question, and also a journalistic ethical question. I think this is a systematic error in the Slovakian system, but this is not something for the EU to regulate. This is something that should be a fight that every member state, every, the journalist associations are responsible for a situation like this, not to cover most of the country and they don't appear in the news. To answer the question of our listener about the central public broadcasting, I think this is a very interesting question. And I think there are two questions in this one question. One is whether we would need a European central public broadcasting. And I tend to believe that it would be useful for at least to make sure that certain information is delivered to people in their national language. Because we have to face it. There are 27 member states in the EU, and there are lots of people who are not speaking good enough English, and their media system is not plural enough to make sure that they get access to information and reliable information about the European Union or other members. So I think this is something that would be reasonable, but outside of the control of any country, as the question says, this is the controversial issue, and this is what John was referring at the beginning, that the EU is stated of member states. How can we exclude governments, and how can we exclude countries from a system that is based on these countries? And I think here comes a financial question. So who would finance such a European broadcaster? If this is the European population, so 500 million people would be able, such as it happens in Germany and so many other countries. But in other countries, in many Eastern European countries, there are direct governmental financial system. The government finances the public service broadcasting, and the public service broadcasting is captured through the financial method. So I think if we will have any kind of public service news agency on behalf of the European Union, we have to make sure that financially it is independent of the European institutions and also financially independent of the country throughout individual financing system.
Could I come in on this? Because I used to actually be the executive editor of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and that broadcast to 22 countries at that point in 28 different languages, and not a dissimilar situation to this hypothetical European broadcaster. The problem is, of course, that then there can't be, it's not a single broadcasting system. What you have is 27, 28 different broadcasting systems, which the central, you have a central newsroom, probably the English language newsroom in RFERL, but that then has two conflicting roles. It's essentially acting like a British BBC World Service and sending that service out to everybody, while at the same time it's continually striving, not always very successfully, but better now, I think, than it used to get stories from those countries, which ought to be better known, and then putting them out in the general English language news service. I think this is a very complicated thing to do, and we did have the advantage of a single political boss, which was in a way the US Congress. I mean, there was a bureaucratic structure to enable that to happen. So they had a watchdog relationship with us. I do think we are more likely, I can't say more than that, to get a European broadcaster emerging from the market as a private one, if you could get one of the major German companies, particularly not a public service one, to in a sense develop an experiment on a European broadcasting system. but that would inevitably create, it would be a very difficult task. And I wouldn't envy the guy who's the executive editor of that.
Thank you, John. And now we have,
my friends, Peter. I'm really sorry to break up these discussions, and I just want to say, my friends, I'm really sorry. Then I have to excuse myself for this debate for a very poetic reason, because I have to catch my slam gig in a town which is like 80 kilometers from Prague. So I really need to go. Very sorry to break this.
No, thank you, Anatol.
Debate, and thanks for inviting me. Hi everyone to Hungary.
Thank you, Anatol. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you. I'm happy you were here. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
And I asked the others, now we do a closing circle that we have like few minutes. We started like 5 minutes late, so we can go 5 minutes longer, and just short closing points if you have some. And I'm sure that we cannot come to a conclusion. It's such a complex question. I'm glad we have been discussing it as an Undergrund Slam Academy event, also because it's clear that it's a legal question, it's a political question, it's a cultural question, and the Undergrund Slam Academy is an attempt to bring all those layers of life together in an experimental fashion. So thanks for experimenting together. And so the closing round, maybe I ask you, what do you take home from the conversation? Who would start? Vesna, would you maybe start? Can I ask you now?
I don't think I have a smart takeaway, because I just came back with more questions, I guess, like what is the solution? I still don't know, to like the press freedom issues. And I really appreciate the diverse views on the question. I guess like we need to continue these conversations. That is my main takeaway.
Thank you. Who would continue?
Well, I think I'm going to do so, but a very simple point, really. I think you've all got to accept, however you may be reluctant to do so, that Hungary is a democracy. There is an election next year. The government could lose that election. Now, I don't say it will. The odds are probably slightly on its side, but it could lose. And therefore, if you're going to want to make changes in laws of any kind, including press media regulations, you should try to get the government you want. And as a matter of fact, as I say, I don't think that that's out of the question. You must have to accept, however, that if you 3 times elect a government with a constitutional 2/3 majority, that the institutions are going to reflect that fact. And you have to, in a sense, respect the rights of both the governing party, but more importantly, their voters, to want to continue something like the present system. And by something like the present system, I don't mean the technical points we've raised, but one in which the decisions of the government count and weigh for more in the political system than they do in those hyper-liberal political systems in which the government is a stakeholder, but other stakeholders like the judicial system is the main one, but also independent bureaucracies and so on. My feeling is the Hungarian people are happier with a liberal democracy in which the democracy part is more important than the liberal. And if you're going to change that, you have to change their minds.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Eva or András, which one of you would?
Well, Eva, if you want.
Okay, I leave you for the closing remark. Unfortunately, I really disagree with you, John, on this.
Sorry, can you speak up a little?
Yes. So I disagree here because I think the elections cannot be considered fair and maybe free if people don't get access to information. And in a media system that we have in Hungary, and also the lack of independent authorities, and I'm not only talking about the media authority, but also the question of other authorities that should be independent, starting with the ombudsman, ending up at the judiciary. This is a very controversial issue, whether we can consider this system as still a democratic system where people can get access to information. And I don't think people voted for a government that is so deeply corrupt, that changed the system so dramatically. They voted for a system that they heard from the media that was, and I have to say that was lying to them. So the problem here is that if you cut people from getting proper and reliable information, they can't make the informed decision. Not to mention that the 2/3 majority, because of changing the election system in Hungary, doesn't mean that 2/3 of the people or the voters voted for Fidesz. There are lots of people who decided not to vote because they were not convinced, and Fidesz capitalized on its power to make sure that these people are not voting and not participating in this very important democratic element, in every 4 years to decide who runs this country. And I think this is what is very important at this point, that whether the system as the Hungarian system exists now can be considered as a system that feeds for a fair and free election in Hungary.
Well, we do radically disagree, Eva. There's no doubt about that. And there's no reason for us, either of us, to feel annoyed about that. That's what these things are about. I think, obviously, we don't want to dominate the last few minutes, but I would say one of the things you've got to bear in mind is that the first constitutional 2/3 majority was achieved from opposition under the system that the previous government had put in. I honestly don't think that people lack information in Hungary. There are opposition newspapers, there are opposition websites, social media. Anybody who wants to read The Guardian, the New York Times can do so on the internet. There is people, well, I was going to say people can travel. Well, of course they can't at the moment, but nonetheless, the experience of going to your next door country or vacation somewhere else, seeing other newspapers, seeing other media, I really think, along with, I think, the Nobel Prize winner, Imre Kertész, who said, it's absurd to call Hungary a dictatorship. Anyone who's lived under a dictatorship can't recognize that. And now, obviously, I know you take the opposite view, but whichever view we take, it surely behoves us to essentially operate the institutions we now have to bring about what each of us considers a democratic outcome. And I don't think, frankly, because I think this is a democracy, I don't think you should despair of winning. I hope you don't win, but I think you can.
Thank you, John. And now András, and then Thomas, and then we'll have to close it, unfortunately.
Well, this evening got a turning point because I absolutely disagree with John. Hungary is not a democracy anymore. For a longer period already, because seemingly the institutions of a democracy do exist. Well, if I have, we do have constitutional court, we have prosecution, we have tribunals, and so on and so on. But all of them are fulfilled with members sent by the party, absolutely influenced by the party, and the media council is a good example. It exists as an authority over the whole Hungarian media, and there are five members of that institution, all delegated from the Fidesz party. The head of the Hungarian Supreme Court was the vice of the Hungarian first prosecutor, Mr. Peter a person who now got all the rights to control all the Hungarian tribunal system and so on and so on. So there could be institutions which are emptied already, but now they are not emptied. For now, they are fulfilled with party delegates. The entire election system is absolutely controlled by Fidesz, and a kind of miracle is needed to get the majority of the Hungarian society let its delegates into the power. But Peter's last question was what we do bring home. I think the situation is bad now, but not much worse than 2 hours before.
Thanks, András. Thomas, and then I would love to hear more from all of you, but I will have to close. Thomas, please.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I thank you all for being here. I think it's a great experience to connect to each other, and I think there is a same experience in all East European or Middle European countries with jumping from feudalism to democracy to fascism to communism and back to democracy, and this chaos of the regimes which we have, which is very connected to the freedom of speech, to the point how we can manage the democracy and things like this. And I think when we can discuss and connect to each other, we can see that clearly, or we can learn from our experience. This is what I bring home, like to know you or to get connected with you, and I'm very thankful that we can communicate in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And what I think I was looking forward to today's discussion also because I thought that it was an open question to me whether we can create a federalist common European safeguard press rule for press freedom or not. And in a way, I'm glad that it's still open. And it seems to me that what was the question for yesterday's discussion in Hungarian also is open to some extent. The question whether the press is free enough to enable the parliamentary elections in Hungary to be free next year. And Klubrádió is a standing example for that, because with all the efforts of its great community with the leadership of András, it is still a very important voice in Hungary and even beyond. And that may make it possible to have a meaningful election next year. And perhaps, of course, it's up to you, John, whether perhaps there could be a continuation of this debate hosted by the Danube Institute. I think I just mentioned that I think it would be really, really interesting to have such a discussion. And I'm so glad that you participated, because you brought in all your comments and in a way and then I will stop my closing comments. It's interesting also that I think that John's skepticism about the European Union in a way met with Gábor Polyák's skepticism, just from a different direction. Anyway, so a lot to think further. Thank you so much for all to participate. I thank the CEU Democracy Institute for its help, and I hope that this event will inspire the slam poetry movement in Europe and beyond to contribute through art, through self-reflection of slam poetry, thinking about these issues. That's what the Undergrund Slam Academy is about, to inspire socially engaged slam poetry. please check out the Facebook page of the Federalist Slam Academy, Undergrund Slam Academy. You can see daily slams also in English. This video will be up as well. And I thank very much the audience who followed us on YouTube. And thank you, Eva Simon from the Civil Liberties Union for Europe, Vesna Wessenauer from the Center for Media, Data and Society from CEU, and John O'Sullivan from the Danube Institute, Tomás Straka, a wonderful co-slammer from Poland, Maciej, a wonderful co-slammer from Slovakia, sorry, and Maciej from Poland, and András Arató from Klubrádió, and also Dimitry Kochenov for opening the event, and Anatol Svahilec from Czech Republic to join us. Thank you so much again, and have a nice rest of the evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.